Hello, students at the Global Awakening Theological Seminary. I'm Peter Young. Really happy to be teaching this class on leadership and ministry. And I print out the syllabus. If you've not done that, I'd encourage you to go ahead and get the syllabus in front of you so we can look at it together. I'm going to be sharing a little bit about my background on this introductory video, how I came into leadership, what that looks like, and then we're going to go through a little bit on the syllabus and just prepare you for the class. We can cover things that are not clear at our first Zoom call, but I wanted you to see the books that we have, talk about the order, some of the philosophy and the papers, see if we could save a little bit of time on our Zoom call so we can get the most of the interaction that we have. So again, I'm really happy to be teaching this class with you and looking forward to seeing what the Holy Spirit, Christ has for us as you develop as leaders. So where I want to start, I think I'd like to just give you a little bit about my background. You've got this in here, but I'm actually teaching a class. I'm an adjunct at Denver Seminary. I teach a class on healing and deliverance there, which is kind of fun. It's a conservative Baptist seminary. Obviously, I'm here teaching at GATS, and then I teach at a supernatural school of ministry that we host here in Colorado called the Colorado School of Kingdom Ministry. And I actually do the Bible track, teach through that, and teach in both first and second year for those students. So teaching something I love to do, and as we do the class, anytime you have any questions, there are things you're thinking about that you'd like to interact with me on, in the syllabus is my email, also a cell phone. Feel free to just be in contact with me about that. So it's a little bit about my background in teaching, a little bit of background about my call to leadership. In fact, somebody asked me that for second year at the School of Ministry just the other day. I think for me, I probably had some natural leadership tendencies as a child, because it seemed like every context, whether it was a camping trip or folk dancing, different things that we did at sports teams, I was always sort of ended up getting put at the top to lead something. And it just seemed like the natural thing that happened for me. But of course, it wasn't formal, other than if I was like team captain on a team or something like that. But once I got out of college, and I had a number of leadership roles, just informally, high school through college. But I ended up becoming a manager at the bank where I worked. I was in banking for 19 years before I became a pastor. So I have both marketplace and pastoral experience. And during that, at one point, I was manager of the national and regional sales in something called treasury management. That's dealing with large companies, helping them move money, doing electronic funds, various things that are not related to the actual lending practices. And I managed a fairly large department of those. And then ultimately, before I became a pastor, I was actually manager of an entire treasury management department. I had a sales function, product development function, I had a customer service, had some operations functions, missing something in there. But there was 4, 5, 6 elements to that whole large department. So that was my role there. As it relates to the church, once I became a Christian in college, I began to work after 3 or 4 years in a college ministry program, was on a leadership staff there. Ended up, before I became a pastor, I was a children's ministry director, I was an elder, started and split 6 or 7 small groups, just had various roles where I did things within the church. And so we planted the church that I'm part of now. I'm a senior pastor here at Bridgeway Church. And I think I may have put my website in here, but it's bridgeway.us. And you can find out about us there. We currently have 7 of us, 7 additional pastors on staff here. And so I am the senior leader of that particular church. And so that's a little bit about my background. What I want to do is talk to you a little bit about the class. I'm going to look at the syllabus. You'll see my bio there, the course description. On page 2, Learning Outcomes, I want to talk a little bit about the textbooks. You're going to be starting with Next Generation Leader by Andy Stanley. Andy is the son of Charles Stanley, very famous preacher. It's a very easy read. I powered through this in 2 to 3 hours. Do a lot of highlighting in my own reading. The goal of the books that you're reading, for each book that you'll read, You're going to be reading to sort of glean content, and then you're going to be writing a paper about it with the key things that you've learned. So I'd encourage you to take notes while you're reading the book, highlight, underline, write in margins, whatever works for you. And this is a good book. He talks about a number of characteristics of leadership: competence, courage, clarity, coaching, and character. It's just a really good start. You'll notice again as you see this, I've written some things down. I take notes as I do that. That helps me when I do papers. I just completed my Doctor of Ministry with Randy Clark and the Randy Clark Scholars, and I remember just it really helped because we had to do papers after each book to just kind of take notes and be ready to do that. So that's your first read. And just so you know, the papers that you're writing, they're going to be additives. You're actually your final paper. By the time you get to that at the end of the 8 weeks, you'll have about 2/3, 3/4 of that paper already written. So the paper that you're writing, I think it's 2 to 3 pages or 3 to 4, I forget, on Next Generation Leaders. It's listed in your syllabus. That's going to get added to the final paper. And that'll be true of each of the books. You're reading this one first. The next is Relational Leadership by Wright. Excellent book as well. Then third, you're following with Building Leaders. This has probably got the most meat in it in terms of content. So these two larger books, we're going to take 2 weeks each because of the content on them. Building Leaders is third, and then we finish with a Ken Blanchard and some secular guys. So actually where these come from, you've got a breadth of writers here, from people that minister in leadership in the secular realm to those that are at the seminary level, that's these guys, to those that are actually pastors and leaders and that are actually doing it. So I'm excited for the books that you're reading. And you also have a paper called Empowered Leadership. It's very short. It's actually a little bit meaty, but there's really some good principles in here that I really want you to catch about embodying as a person who you are as a leader. So that's the reason for reading this. You'll have a week to do it. Goodness, it takes half an hour to read at the most if you underline everything. So that'll be good. That'll be sort of a light week for you when you do that, and week 2. But I do want we'll have a chance to talk about that. So that's a little bit about that. Let me look back at the syllabus and see what else I want to highlight. You've got some teaching videos and how they're working. I'll just be really honest. I'm actually preaching them a week ahead of the class. So today is the 20th. You'll be reviewing this before the Zoom call on the 26th. But or 27th. I think it's the 26th. Let me get that right so we don't miss it. Yeah, it's on Monday, the 26th. But what we're doing with these is it's about a 45 minute preaching series, and I'm going to be giving some content that may be from some of the books, but it's also some things from the outside. So the first one that you'll hear and see is actually, it's out of Dr. Miles Monroe has a book on leadership, and I preached some of that content and some of my own about that, and it was about Created to Lead, that in every capacity, all of you are leaders, whether you have a title as leader or not. And so I'll be about a week ahead. You'll have a link to those videos, so you'll be able to watch it right from your phone or your computer, any kind of device. And towards the end of the class, we've got a couple of guest speakers coming in. So you'll be doing it the same week I preach it. And then at the very end, I'm actually going to film the last 3 messages into one segment that I'll give you just independent of preaching it at the church, because I'll be doing 10 weeks at the church and only 8 weeks with you guys. So that's how that works, those videos. And you see those listed there. The Zoom calls, you'll have a screenshot that will show up of my Zoom at the moment, and I'm going to actually look at it here. But I think some of you are familiar with this. If you've been in Tom Latier's class, I believe he did a Zoom call with you, and he mentioned some of you by names. I think some of you have done that. I'm opening my Zoom just to look at it at the moment. And in the Zoom call, I think just to remind you, at the very lower left is the mute button. So when you come on the call, if you've not been on before, if you're a new student, when you first get the link, it's going to prompt you to load the app. It just takes seconds. It doesn't take up much space on your device. I'll give you the ability to do that. Again, I like it through a laptop because I can see everybody's just got a bigger screen versus a phone. So I'd encourage you to do it on your desktop or laptop if at all possible. But you'll be muted when you come in. When you want to talk on the call, you'll unmute yourself. There's also a chat screen, and it's on the lower part of your Zoom. You'll see that there. You'll just click on the chat icon, and it brings up the chat on the right side, and you'll see that on the screen that you're looking at. I just put in welcome to Zoom, but as we're going through the class, we can chat with one another. We can post an outline of what I'm sharing if I'm sharing something. If some of you have content that you want to share with the class, you can put that in the chat session. So the way you're graded on your Zoom calls is participation. So I'd encourage you all to once or twice during our hour-long call chip in, offer your thoughts, and they're each worth 2 points each. And provided you're attending and provided you're participating, you should be good to go on getting those points. Papers are outlined fairly significantly in your syllabus. I've described them for you. By the way, you've got to do the reading to do the papers. So they're really extracted from that. And the goal of your papers is to begin building towards the main paper at the end. So how it's starting, your very first paper is a personal reflection on the quality of leaders or quality leadership. And where I'd encourage you to think about this, I'll just pull somebody up in my mind. I had a manager, her name was Betsy, in the bank, and I'm just going to have you tell some stories about several of leaders. It could be parents, coaches, family members, somebody you've worked for, somebody at church, a pastor. And I just want you to think about that leader and why did you feel they were a great leader. I don't want the leaders that are bad leaders in your life, although that may be instructive to say, I didn't like this about these leaders. I've had some good and bad leaders in my life. But what do you appreciate? What do you notice about them? So I'll pull up a couple in my mind. So for example, Betsy was my first boss in the Treasury Management Department after I came out of my training program at the bank. And I think what made her a great manager is she was very relational. She took interest to find out what I was interested in personally. She believed in me, so there were times I was growing, I was still figuring out what to do, and her boss, sort of another boss, was kind of the micromanager type, and he'd get really nervous if I was going to do a sales presentation. Is it going to work? And he'd be stressing out, and Betsy would just believe in me. She'd just say, you can do this, you can do great. And she'd sort of run interference between me and this other boss that was kind of controlling. And I think the fact that I was believed in really helped me flourish as a person. She also stood up for me and also for the department. So I just saw the commitment. She was really a servant. She was trying to make those of us there great. And actually, our particular department that we're in our region amongst banks, we became the top bank in the region and actually in the top 20 in the nation just because of this woman. She was so developing of her staff. She was just laid herself down, and she was more interested in all her employees getting recognized and doing really great than herself. And so, those are some qualities I noticed in her. And so that's just kind of an example, and you just pull 2, 3, maybe 4 qualities out of each leader, and that's your first paper. And I'm having you do that before you start reading books, because the books will start telling you what great qualities look like. But I'm interested in you thinking personally, and because this will help you understand your own style in leadership and what you personally value, so that you can kind of sift through the reading and narrow your focus a little bit. Because the goal at the end of the class is to develop your own philosophy of leadership. What do you value the most? If you were a manager, if you were a pastor, if you were a leader, if you were head of a nonprofit, if you were just a family member that had oversight of kids, or whatever it's going to look like, how would you lead? What would your philosophy be? And that's actually your final paper, final assignment for the class. So you'll be building through your personal reflection in paper 1. Then you have papers on the books you're reading. And as you integrate those, you'll get some learning content, some thoughts behind that. At the close, you'll develop your own philosophy of leadership. And that's actually something I did when I was in banking. I took note of the leaders I didn't like, the screamers and the ones that were, managed by fear and intimidation. Those are no fun to work with. And I just sort of developed a philosophy, and I wrote down, I just kind of kept notes. If I was a leader, I would be serving my employees or my people, and I would be calling them to greatness. And I would create an empowering culture. And for me, this is what empowerment looks like. And I was just kind of keeping notes. And so as you read, have that in mind, that the end product is for you to develop your own philosophy of leadership. And you'll see, I think it's on page 5 of your syllabus. It's called the Final Integration Paper, Personal Philosophy of Leadership. And I've outlined the sections for you. Starting point, your personal reflections, that's paper 1. Reflections on assigned readings and class videos, that's the papers you're doing on the books and the videos, and that goes right into section 2. Section 3 is your philosophy of leadership that you'll hopefully be building towards throughout the class. And that's it. And it's due, I'm giving you 2 days after the end of class, just because I wanted to make sure you didn't feel rushed and that you actually had a full 8 to 10 days to really think through the paper. We'll do an optional Zoom call towards the end that you can interact with me and other students to just make sure you feel comfortable with that. And in terms of grading and points, you'll see on the Populi site, I've got a whole list of how that works, but essentially there's 100 points available in the class. That would be 100%. And as you know, the GATS grading criteria is anything 90% or above is an A, 80 to 90 is a B. And so you'll see the point totals. Roughly it's split in quarters. Your first short papers are roughly worth a quarter of your grade. It's 27%. Your final paper is almost a quarter. Class participation, a quarter. Reading and videos, a quarter. So you'll see on the Populi every assignment, every paper, every Zoom call, every chat discussion session that you have with us on Populi is listed there with the point totals, and you'll be able to keep track of your grade, because say once we're done with the Zoom call, if everyone's participated, you'll each get 2 points. It'll automatically go towards your grade, and you can see where you're at as the class is progressing. I've decided what I'll do, because I'm really interested in all of you doing as well as you would like. On your reading list that we gave, we posted on the Populi site, if I recall, I had 4 or 5 extra books. Let me just pull those up. Those extra books, let's see here. Let me pull up my Populi site. Reading assignments, let's take a look here. This would have been under, in your stuff, it would be under, not lessons, but probably info for the class. This is a document that's got your required books, optional books. I'll go ahead and give you some credit. If you felt like you fell behind either from sickness or busyness with your job and you missed a paper or you had to miss a Zoom call and you felt like, boy, my points are slipping below 90 and I really like an A, I'm going to let you read one of those 4 books. I would totally recommend The 5 Dysfunctions of Team or Good to Great. Actually, I did not put Good to Great on there. That would probably be my best choice. And I'd be glad to put that out there also for you. And if you read those and write a reflection paper on that, you'll get, give you up to 8 points for that. So that'll be like extra credit if you feel like you need that. So I think that's really all I need to share. I did create a paper template, and I brought a sample. This is just, it's actually a Word document, and it's already it's a template for you. So the way you'll do your cover page on your papers and your final paper, it lists that. All you do is you put in your paper title and your name, otherwise, and the date of the paper. Otherwise, it's there. I've got an appropriate Turabian 8 footnote. As you noticed in the syllabus, you'll be using Turabian 8. There's a place called eturabian.com, which actually takes all of the books, anything that you do, you just key in the author, you find the book, it'll put it automatically into Turabian 8 format, both for your footnote and for your bibliography. But it shows you on the paper, it's got the title of the paper, the section, and it's double spaced, as you can see, and it's already formatted for you. So literally all you're going to do is type in this. The page numbers are already in there, and then the bibliography section, again in Turabian 8, is there for you. So you only need to do bibliography, obviously, in your final paper, but I'd like you to consider footnoting in each of your papers. So if you were reading Stanley first and you're talking about Stanley and you just really liked a quote, like here's one: leaders are not always the first to see the need for change, but they're the first to act. If God's speaking to you about the importance of a leader leading the charge and just setting the pace and modeling it, and you might want to quote that. Of course, when you do that, you've got the page number. This paper template will automatically, you just in Word do insert footnote, not endnotes, footnotes, and you'll just type that quote, obviously, and then you just insert the note and it'll automatically reference it for you on the bottom. It's a good practice to get in, to be footnoting your papers, to quote, especially if any of you ever teach or are doing anything in ministry. Anytime you borrow anybody else's material or thought, you really need to reference where it comes from, either verbally or whatever. And so as you develop this paper, when you're finished with it, your philosophy, you'll actually have quotes. You'll know where you got things, got ideas. And yes, you'll make them your own, but it's already documented for you. So I think that's it. We'll talk on the Zoom call if there's any questions, but I wanted to give you a little bit of a head start so that I don't do all the talking at Monday in our first call. But again, really looking forward to you. I have set 6:30 Mountain Time, which is 8:30 Eastern Time. One of you has communicated to me that you teach. You don't want to be up too late, so it'll be roughly from 8:30 to 9:30, maybe 9:45 at the very latest Eastern Time. For the student that's in Nepal, it's going to be actually 6:15 in the morning, so you're going to have to get up early. Hopefully you can join us. I was trying to pick a time where you in Nepal could join us, because you're roughly 12 hours from my time, which is interesting. You're not exactly 12 hours. You're like 12 hours and 15 minutes or something like that. So hoping everybody can make the call. Look forward to it. By all means, send me an email or a question as we get ready for our first call. And you're free to start reading. You'll be starting with this, then the paper on empowered leadership. So however you want to get started in the class, I know you might be in one now currently, because many of you are taking one or two of the online classes already at GATS. But if you want to get a head start, you can do so. And I certainly look forward to seeing you guys.